And showtime! Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of ChannelPro 5-Minute Roundup. Look at news, trends, and tips for the SMB channel in 5 minutes or thereabouts. My name is Rich Freeman. I'm executive editor of the ChannelPro Network, also a co-host of this program. I am joined this week, as I am every week, by your other co-host, Eric Simpson, business transformation and improvement advisor to MSPs and other IT providers. Eric, how goes it?
It goes well, Rich. I'm back from my travels northeast where it was cold, a little drizzly, a little dusting of snow. Back in California where we're past, I guess, some thunderstorms, but it's super windy. Like I've got things like falling over out on the patio and putting the patio umbrellas down and stuff. It's pretty crazy right now. So, but other than that, everything's great. How about you?
Everything is it's great here too. I'll just observe you are on a rough run with weather. You were in Buffalo for some snow, thankfully not all that much. Last week before that, it was raining like the Dickens in Southern California, if I remember right. And now it's windy. What the heck's going on?
I know. Well, we could talk about that plenty on another episode, I'm sure, of what's happening with the world and the environment. But
Right.
what do we got cooking for our attendees today, Rich?
Well, you know what? This is just a little bit belated as we move on to our top story here, because about 2 weeks ago, as we're recording this, Datto published a new study. It's a cybersecurity study. They went out to some SMBs, so they went out to your customers, Channel Pros, and asked them a bunch of questions about security. And this is really the first opportunity we've had to talk about it. I thought some of the results were really interesting. And I'm going to position this not as a good news, bad news story, Eric, but kind of as a good news story for reasons that you'll see. So first of all, it's a classic scenario, classic phenomenon in the world of SMB technology that everyone in the audience understands, that you go off to your SMB customer and they don't understand the cyber risks that they're facing. They're not willing to spend money on security or as much as you think they need to. MSPs have been dealing with this forever and ever. Well, there's some data in this report that suggests that's getting to be less and less of an issue. It would be interesting to know if folks in the audience agree. They asked SMBs, how likely is it that you will get hit by a phishing attack in the next 12 months? 72% of them said somewhat or extremely likely. They understand what phishing is and that indeed, it is a high likelihood that that's going to be coming their way. They asked the same question about ransomware. What are the odds you're going to get hit by ransomware in the next 12 months? About 60%, 61% said extremely or somewhat likely, and 34% said specifically extremely likely. And by the way, only 2% said, I'm not familiar with that type of attack. So only 2% of the SMBs have never heard of ransomware, which is good news. 34% thinks it's extremely likely that that is coming their way in the next 12 months. Approximately a third of the SMBs they spoke to spend between 20 and 50% of their budget specifically on security. And roughly equal numbers, 40% each said that their plans are either to keep their IT budget overall the same or to increase it. So security budget should be going up at a lot of these companies. And then last but not least, the SMBs were asked, do you have cyber insurance? 69% yes, 23% no, 8% not sure. Good news there. So this doesn't mean that problem solved, SMBs understand security. It's never going to be hard selling security to them again. But these are not results I necessarily would have anticipated prior to having read this report. Now, I said good news, good news. Here's some more good news. It might actually be bad news for some people out there. One of the things that Datto asked about is if you were successfully hit by a cyber attack of some kind in the last 12 months, what was the impact? Around 45% of businesses that got hit with something endured more than 2 days of downtime. There's another statistic in there where they had a long list of security technologies, antivirus, managed firewall, etc. Only 43% of the people who responded to the survey are doing security awareness training. Here's another kind of key statistic. They asked these SMBs, how satisfied are you with your MSP. 31% are completely satisfied. 54% are somewhat satisfied. And if you combine that sort of somewhat satisfied number with some of the other things that I was just saying, it suggests that there is some room for better security service out there from MSPs. And we know, by the way, thanks to a study that ConnectWise did about 2 years ago, that the number one reason customers change MSP is because of concerns about the quality of the help they're getting on security. So the good news here is there's some room out there for you to maybe win some business, potentially from competitors, by doing a better job, a stronger job on security, getting a better BDR strategy in there, so none of your customers ever has to go more than 2 days in the event of an incident. Getting security awareness training in place, that number should be way above 43%. The only hint of bad news is if you are not doing some of these things really well, you are potentially a little bit vulnerable, Eric.
Huge opportunity. I was also a little bit surprised at the data here. It really reflects, Rich, that business owners understand the risk now, and now the way that they're answering these questions and the way that they were posed was very interesting as well. It's like, what are you spending your budget on? You mentioned 20 to 50% of their IT spend for a large percentage of these folks is going towards cybersecurity. There's a little bit of contradictory evidence here in the report, though. It says that they realize and they expect to be phished and ransomed, yet only 43% are investing in end user cybersecurity awareness training. Is how you thwart that, right? So again, I think there's a huge opportunity for MSPs and channel pros to get in there and have these conversations. And in fact, the report was so good, Rich, I was thinking to myself, wow, screenshots of some of this data would go great into a presentation for a prospect or an existing client, because it's spelled out in such a clear, concise, and direct manner. It's very compelling. So where can channel pros get a copy of this report, Rich?
So we will include a link to it. Actually, it's a great point, Eric. And so we'll include a link to that in the show notes. If you are listening to the podcast version of the show, you'll see a link to this in the show notes. If you're on the ChannelProNetwork.com version of this, or YouTube, we'll make sure there are links there so that you can actually go and read. There's a lot more data on the report than what we've gone through here. And it is interesting stuff. And yeah, some of it is slide ready for presentations if that's something that you choose to do. And you know what? A presentation about security to your customers is one important conversation for channel pros out there to have, but you should be having conversations with your employees as well, Eric, and that kind of hands us off to your tip of the week.
Thanks, Rich. Yeah, and the tip of the week is really about checking in with your staff. I'm doing a couple of team building engagements with a couple of clients right now. And, of course, I have kind of a series of questions that I ask to try to understand what their challenges are, what opportunities do they see. And I want to share 3 questions that every, business owner or manager or supervisor should be asking every one of their team members. And I mean, ask everyone in the organization these questions. And the first one is, what is something that the organization is doing today that they think we should stop doing, and why? And boy, oh boy, everyone has an opinion about this stuff, and some of it is very actionable. And sometimes the responses that we get are a little bit surprising. So I was I kind of, working with some of my clients, I kind of understand where their challenges are, but seeing it from the particular employee's perspective in the role that they're in, casts a different, priority to it or perspective. I mean, I know that it's difficult to, do some of the things that we do in an IT organization, but when you hear kind of an employee take you through a process or their day and you go, wow, this is something we should definitely raise, in a larger conversation and see if we can, adjust for that or solve for that or do something, differently. The second question is kind of the follow on to the first question. It says, and it is basically, what is something that the company isn't doing that we should be doing? So they kind of go hand in hand. And sometimes the person will collude both answers, right? But what is it something that we should be doing that we're not doing? And it's very interesting to hear the responses and to see how many are similar, and then to try to kind of prioritize these and then have constructive discussions about this. The third question, which is very, very interesting, that I'm not so certain that ChannelPro business owners, supervisors, and managers really understand or ask often enough. And it is this: if you could wipe the slate clean and write your perfect job description or role within the organization, what would that be? And Rich, as I go through, these conversations and these interviews with teams, it's surprising to me, the motivation or the drive that some of these employees have. I'm hearing things like, "Hey, I want to be in charge of operations. I want to be in charge of this. I want to," and these are folks that normally are very quiet and are just doing their role, or they'll share something with me like, a lot of my time is spent doing this, which is not really my job description, but I kind of like it, and I'd like to explore doing more of that. So having these candid conversations and opening up this two-way communication, I think is really, really critical. And I get to enjoy kind of the marriage counselor role, right? Because when I'm coming in, I'm talking to the staff, I think they feel a little bit more candid and open. Sometimes they may feel a sense of maybe some awkwardness or something like that, or maybe they kind of don't want to share some things with their leadership and management. And I think that's a shame. I think leadership and management should make it very plain and clear that we are here to have open, direct, honest, two-way communication between ourselves. We want to understand, what we're doing right, what we could work on together, and really, what challenges you're having and where you see yourself. And, I think this helps just grow a healthier organization, and it builds a better camaraderie, morale, and teamwork. And, I will challenge every ChannelPro and MSP to kind of ask these three questions of your team, and sit down and just, or maybe some of you take your staff to lunch here and there. I know a lot of partners of mine that, have a specific day every month where they'll go out with one of their staff and take them to lunch and have these conversations. That's a great way to do it as well.
You made the big point that came to my mind listening to those two questions, and it's really particularly about the first of those three questions. What's something we're doing that we shouldn't be doing? You're going to get interesting answers to that question, but simply by asking it, you're going to let employees know that you are licensed to speak your mind. We probably all at some point in our life work for somebody who really just didn't want to hear anything that doesn't dovetail with what they already think, isn't receptive to criticism or different ways of thinking. Simply by asking that question, you're letting your employees know this is an open organization where you are free to speak your mind, say what you think, and those ideas are valued. Along similar lines, what's something that we're not doing and should be doing? You as the business owner or whatever kind of leadership role you play in the organization, you cannot be expected to come up with all the good ideas. So here's another opportunity to leverage that talent and the creativity across your team to come up with some ideas you might not have come up with on your own. And then it's interesting to hear you kind of describe the reaction to that last question about, well, what is your ideal job role? Because we've spoken before on this show about how important it is to be checking in regularly with your employees and talking about career development. That's a key part of what you got to do to retain people, especially right now. But it almost sounds like that particular question maybe unlocks some candor in people that just having a career development conversation doesn't, which would be interesting, that if there's a bit of a magic trick to that particular question.
Yeah, and on that last point, Rich, I think everyone has been affected by the last several years, right? Everybody looks at things a little bit differently. They reevaluated, right, what's important to them. And I think, the conversation about, work-life balance is starting to really impact organizations. And, what does it take to keep great employees? And maybe what they thought they wanted, before the pandemic is a little bit different now. Maybe they want to, have these other discussions. And I think the key point here, and you're touching on it, is, employees want to know that they're heard and they're seen, right? And they feel like, they can have a voice in the organization. And in fact, giving them that, like you say, that license to be candid, we may hear things that we already know or assume, like, yeah, we should stop doing that, or here's something that we should be doing because we're doing it all wrong and things like that. And it may be already on a list somewhere, but when you hear it directly from, one of your staff, or maybe 2 or 3 of them kind of, say the same thing, it may, cause us to reprioritize addressing it, right? So again, hey, the attitude about, yeah, we already know about it. It's, it's number 155 on the list of 1,000 things. But when, you're hearing it directly from an employee that's, expressing how it's impacting them, and that it's on their mind, and it's kind of something that's shared between a few of them, you might be encouraged to go ahead and say, you know what, I'm going to pluck that, and we're going to, move it up on the list, and let them know that we're going to move it up on the list, and we'll be working on it, this quarter, and just get some of that goodwill, and then come through, and again, this is all about that team spirit, that open communication, and working together to, increase the satisfaction of the most important resource we have in our organizations, is our team members.
Just 3 questions, folks, so get on that. Leaves us with time for just one more story, though. It comes to us from Japan, actually, where somebody with either boundless curiosity, Eric, or too much time in his hands, came up with, he's been conducting experiments in which he connected a webcam to motion detection software to Pokemon, an online game. He wanted to see if he could translate the fish's movement into, mouse movements or whatever in the game, and actually complete the game without human intervention. Turns out, yes, you can. In fact, the first time he had the fish complete a game without him, it took 3,000 hours, Eric, but it did happen. More recently, he was running this again. He got about 1,100 hours into this particular game, and this guy was not in the room, but the game crashed. And somehow or another, the fish are still moving, the motion detection software is still moving the mouse around. Somehow or another, he got taken to the purchasing console in this, and the fish actually added 500 yen to this guy's account using the credit card that was already stored in his account. The fish made a purchase for him without him being involved in any way. Yeah, so, maybe think twice about empowering your fish to get anywhere near a credit card, certainly anywhere near a game. I would not have thought that your fish could be that thoughtless with your credit card.
Yeah, Rich, I mean, who comes up with this stuff? Like, I've got an aquarium full of fish. I love Pokemon. I'm going to hook it all up to see if my fish can play Pokemon. And then, the next day, you've got the delivery from, the store delivering fish food and stuff, right?
Yeah.
Fish are taking over.
500 yen, fortunately, is just a few bucks, but boy, it could have been worse. Well, folks, that is all the time we have for you this week on the 5-Minute Roundup. We thank you so much for joining us. You know what? We are both a video and a podcast, as regular viewers and listeners know. If you are watching the video, but you want to check us out as a podcast, go to wherever you get your podcasts, whether that's Apple or Google, Stitcher, Spotify, you name it, you're going to find us there. You can subscribe, you can rate and review, and we would thank you very much if you would do all 3 of those things. If you are listening to the podcast right now, be curious to check us out on video, then the best thing to do is go to YouTube, look for the ChannelPro Network channel on YouTube. Once again, you can subscribe, and if you click that little bell icon, we'll even let you know when the new episodes become available. You can read more about security and research studies and all sorts of great ways to grow your business by going to channelpronetwork.com every day, because we've got amazing new content going up for you there every day. To learn more about Erick and the work he does with his clients, you're going to want to visit ericksimpson.com. That is ERICK Simpson.com. So once again, that's all the time we've got this week. Thank you very much for joining us. We're going to be back next week with another episode for you. Until then, please enjoy the rest of your week. Erick and I are enjoying the rest of your week already.